Hey everybody, this is Tara with Community America. I'm here with Carly and Jason, and we're very excited to be talking to you guys today about FAFSA and all things financial aid.
Absolutely. Yeah. I'm Jason Anderson. I'm one of our education and career planners. We're going to talk a little bit about the FAFSA, but for right now, we're just waiting for everybody to join in. But yeah, if you have any questions right off the bat, feel free to put them in the comments section, and we'd love to answer those once we get started here in a couple minutes.
Jason and I came to the credit union in March to start this program to help families navigate the world of higher education, and we have both worked at lots of different institutions. So between us, we've covered public schools, private schools, community colleges, college admissions, financial aid, Res Life, fundraising. So we have been around the block, and we are excited to help you today.
Yeah, hi Jenny. It's good to have you here. We can't wait to start either.
Sure. So before we get started, we have some rules we need to follow. So I'm going to read you a disclaimer word for word. The content provided is for informational purposes only. Each viewer has unique and different financial circumstances, so what we talk about today should not be deemed to have universal applicability. None of the content provided should be construed to be tax or legal advice. For more details, feel free to schedule a meeting with one of us through the Community America website, and we will add the link in the comments. Also know that any resources that we share today are free resources. Anyone can access them. That's what Jason and I believe in. We want you to go to school, but we want you to do it with the least amount of debt as possible. And any resources we suggest, they're not sponsors of Community America, and we're not pushing any products. We just want you to save some money.
Absolutely. And speaking of free resources, you can actually schedule a meeting with us. So we'll provide the link for you all to sign up with us and have a face-to-face meeting. We can talk about a number of different things, not just the FAFSA. We talk about all the pain points when it comes to college. So how do you get admitted? How do you prepare? How do you figure out what career you want to do? So all of those things. We obviously get a lot of folks that come to us wondering how they're going to finance college. It's one of the biggest purchases that you'll have, and the FAFSA is a big part of that. So we're excited to talk a little bit about that once we get started here in a couple of minutes.
We don't have to just be a senior going to school next year. We can talk about the FAFSA forecaster for our younger students or parents who are curious about financing multiple kids in school. We can talk about all of that, different resources. So you can ask your questions today or follow up with us afterwards.
Speaking of college, let's talk about our own college experience. So I went to Rockhurst for my undergraduate degree. That was a little bit ago. Had a great experience there. Lived on campus and triple majored in 3 years. So I got my undergraduate degrees in nonprofit theology and Spanish. Went on to get my master's in higher education at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. And then a few years later, I got my MBA at Golden Gate University.
And I went to undergrad in Minnesota at Mankato, so Minnesota State Mankato. And I was a student athlete. That's why I went up there so I could swim. I got my master's degree at Iowa State. Love my Cyclones, and came to Kansas City in 2007. So I've been working in higher ed since 2004, but specifically in college admissions since 2007. And we are really excited to be able to help families now from the outside. Like, we're familiar with higher education, but now we get to do it from a different seat at the table. It's been a lot of fun.
Absolutely. Yeah, we definitely provide an unbiased opinion on what the best fit is for you. Because, what we've realized is working in higher education, you tend to advocate for the school you work for, rightfully so. But we don't work for a school. So we work for Community America, and we work for our members. And so we can talk about what is the best fit for you all. So that's helpful. And it looks like we're here at noon. Let's talk a little bit about what this will look like. So we're going to talk about the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid.
Wait, what was that first one?
Free. It's free. Yeah, definitely. So don't ever pay for the FAFSA. And we're going to talk a little bit about what that looks like. And we're going to tell you a little bit in presentation style about the FAFSA. But we're going to stop and take questions as well. So it's going to be a pretty free-flowing process, and if you have questions, feel free to put them in that comment box, and we'll address those as they come up. And that'll probably lead to some topics we didn't even plan on.
Sure, and as you're joining us, looks like we have some people joining us, go ahead and comment hi so we know that you're here, and then of course ask questions along the way. We are going to read a disclaimer, so don't get too excited. The content provided is for informational purposes only. Each viewer has unique, different financial circumstances, so what we talk about today should not be deemed to have universal applicability. None of the content provided should be construed to be tax or legal advice. For more details, feel free to schedule a meeting with one of us through the Community America website. We are a free resource for members and non-members. We will add that link to our comments. Also know that any free resources that Jason and I suggest today, they're just suggested because they're free and we use them as planners, so we want you to be able to use them too. They are all accessible by anyone. Nothing that we suggest is a sponsor of Community America or anything like that. So just know that they're out there, they're free, and that's what we use to do our job.
And thanks to Luann and Nathan for joining us. So for the rest of you all that are watching, just put a hi in the comments box. Let us know that we're talking to people and not just talking to a screen. And we'd love to hear from you. So.
Okay, so while we wait for our first question, Jason already told you what the FAFSA stands for, the Free Application for Federal Student Aid. How do you get the FAFSA?
Yeah, so there's a number of ways you can fill it out, and the most popular way is online. So you can go to the website, and that can be an easy Google search, just FAFSA, and it will get you to the link. And it will be a .gov site. This is obviously published by the government. So make sure it's the official FAFSA site, and then you can essentially go on and apply online. There are a number of other ways that you can apply. For instance, you can do it through a PDF, and you can print it off and mail it in. But the most popular is definitely just to fill it out online.
Yeah, and so the FAFSA is almost one of the last things that you do when you go to college. When you're starting the conversation around college, you really need to think about what type of school or training you need so that you can save appropriately or plan appropriately. And we have what we call an educational financing philosophy. And every family is different. Hi, Mandy.
And we'll get to your question here in a second.
Glad you joined us. Every family's philosophy is going to be different. Every family's situation is different. And the point is that you are all on the same page. So when you're developing your philosophy, it really comes down to what do you or does your child want to do. So if they want to do something that requires an applied science degree, which is a 2-year degree designed to put you in the workforce right away, you may need to save less money than if they want to be a lawyer or a doctor, and you know that there will be training after a bachelor's degree. Those two paths have different costs, and so those are some things that you should think about prior to even starting the savings.
Absolutely. So Mandy's asked, if parents are divorced, how is the FAFSA filed? And I actually know Carly's dealt with this issue before, so I'm going to let her answer this one.
Yeah, this is a really common question, and it really comes down to what parent provides more than 50% of the support for the students. And so whether that is they live with that parent or the parent, the 50% financially, every individual circumstance is unique. So it may not be as clear cut as that, but this is a common question. So we can get you specific questions about your specific situation, but most of the times it comes down to the parent who provides more than 50% of that support. So thank you, Mandy.
Yeah, thanks, Mandy. And it also may mean you have to do some calculations because obviously the FAFSA uses the 2 years prior now for your financial information. So sometimes it means adding in a spouse's income, subtracting a spouse's income. But like Carly said, it does go back to the specific circumstance. And there is some guidance given by the government on their official student aid website on this specific topic that you might want to look into.
And I would add a common question that follows this one is if the parent is remarried, so the parent whose information you would use, if that parent is remarried, then the step parent's information does often need to be included. And so keep that in mind as well as if you're living with a parent who is now remarried to a step-parent. So Nathan, what info is needed to file the FAFSA? Good question.
Yeah, and I can tell you one of the first things that you're going to need is the FSA ID. And this is needed by the student and the parent. So you both need to apply for separate FSA IDs. And it's a really simple process. All you do is go to the official FAFSA website and you apply for your FSA ID.
What's the purpose of the FSA ID?
Yeah, it's basically to protect your information. And just like you would have a specific identifier for your taxes, the government's doing the same thing for FAFSA. Now, I can tell you that there are options to apply without that, but it's just really not recommended. You should apply for your FSA ID. It's really simple, and it protects your information and that of your students.
So you're going to need your social security number or your alien registration number if you are not a U.S. citizen. You'll need your federal income tax information for the year for which you're applying. So it's called prior year. So if you're entering in the fall of 2018, you don't use the prior year, you use the prior year. So you would use tax information from 2016. So for those of you who have seniors right now and the FAFSA just opened, so you may be filing it for entry into next fall, they'll be freshmen in the fall of 18, you'll use your tax information for 2016. If your student is going to school in the fall of 2019, you'll use the tax information from 2017. You'll also need bank statements and investment information, any untaxed information, untaxed income information, and then like Jason said, you'll use your FSA ID to sign your FAFSA electronically. So.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, we want to say hi to Scott too, so appreciate you joining us. Now, what does it look like? A lot of people, sometimes we need to take a couple steps back from the FAFSA. And one is, what is your education savings philosophy? We find that a lot of folks come to us and say, hey, I need to save for college, or I need to get money to fund my gap between the money that I have and the full cost of college. And sometimes we just need to step back and say, okay, well, what is a goal that you have for college? Not only what do you need to save for, but are you looking at a 2-year school, a 4-year school? Are you looking at, constricting your student to stay at a state school, or is it a blank check to go wherever in the United States, or even abroad? And so sometimes we have to actually define what some of those goals are before we even get at the financing aspect of it. So I wanted to talk about that a little bit. Now, this obviously isn't about an education savings philosophy, so I'm just going to leave it at that. But the next thing is you've got to look at what am I actually applying for when I apply for the FAFSA. And there's a number of things you're applying for. The first is what everybody loves, the free money from the government, and those are called grants. Now, I can tell you that that's not money for everyone. A lot of the financial questions that you're being asked as far as income and assets are concerned, or to see if you qualify for that free money from the government. And I can tell you, just as a general rule of thumb, families with about $20,000 in joint income to about $50,000 are the ones that are going to get that free money from the FAFSA. So just as a rule of thumb.
And that excuse me for interrupting, but Jenny, we see your question about the income level and whether income level impacts how much money you can receive. It does. Income, the FAFSA looks at income, assets, and household information. So income is definitely one of the 3 game players. And just like Jason said, if you're making more than $50,000 on if that's what's showing on your AGI and your taxes, then you're likely not going to qualify for any of that free money, which is the grants. But that's not the only thing that you can get from the FAFSA.
Absolutely. So after free money comes our subsidized and unsubsidized loans. And so we need to talk about what that means. So subsidized loan is when the government pays for the interest while you're in school. And so you're getting a loan for that amount. So essentially it is subsidized aid from the government. After that, you obviously have unsubsidized, which is where the government won't pay any interest. But the good thing about these 2 loans is they run right now about 4 to 4.5% interest, and they have about a 1% origination fee. So they're really good loans as far as interest rates are concerned. And in that regard, they're also subsidized by the government because you're getting a really good interest rate. After that, sometimes parents qualify for what's called a Parent Plus loan. And that's essentially the government's way of helping you fund the gap between what they say you can contribute and your aid that you're getting and what the full cost of the college is. So you can definitely get those as well. Now those go under the name of the parent, not the student. So all the aid that we've talked about so far, besides that one, goes under the student's name. But a Parent Plus loan, as the name implies, goes to the parent. Those do also require a credit check.
So it's nice, Jeanette, it's nice to see you. Yes, you can absolutely schedule an appointment with us. We are able to visit with you at the branch that's most convenient for you. So you can find us online, or we can follow up with you after the chat. We've got your information here, so thanks for reaching out. And again, if you are just joining us, feel free to say hi or ask your questions. Like Jason said, those subsidized, the student loan versions, subsidized and unsubsidized, they are a good option if you still have need, because it allows the student to carry them. So the student doesn't have to be of a certain age, or doesn't have to have a credit score established to be eligible for the FAFSA student loans, versus a private loan if you still demonstrate need after you've fulfilled everything from the FAFSA. So families ask all the time, you know, I make too much money, should I file the FAFSA? And I say absolutely, you should always file the FAFSA because it's free. Okay, so, and they've made it simpler. It really, I think when the FAFSA opened up this year, the first one was submitted within 20 minutes of it being open. So it has gotten quicker, and it's a free application, and all students can qualify for the unsubsidized student loan option. And so just because you qualify for it doesn't mean you have to take it. You can say, hey, no thanks, I don't need anything. But I don't think it would necessarily have been a waste of your time.
Yeah, and we've worked with families that have saved a lot for college, but the shocking piece of it is sometimes if you go for that traditional route and you're staying and living on campus and you have personal fees, and you have fees from the college, and you have books, a lot of times you may not realize you may want that $5,500 unsubsidized loan because it'll help you fill that gap. So you should definitely apply for it, and not to mention a lot of colleges use this information to administer their own aid.
Mm-hmm.
So if you don't fill out the FAFSA, they're not going to have that information, you're not going to get that money.
That's a good point. So Missouri, we've got members on both sides of the state line here. So Missouri, your state aid is awarded by the results that you put on your FAFSA. Kansas requires a second application. So just keep that in mind depending on what side of the state line you live.
And Jeanette, I'm seeing your comments. Yeah, definitely. Thank you for being here for as little or as much time as you could. And we are recording this presentation so we can make it available. And also, if we're gonna, like we said, we're gonna provide that link that you can request a meeting with us. No need to leave contact information or anything like that. We'll give you the link to sign up. But thank you for being here.
Yeah, and another thing that you can get through the FAFSA is called work study, and essentially that is you are working for the institution on campus or maybe off campus at one of its partnering organizations, and the government is paying the institution to pay you. Work study is a need-based qualification, so not everyone qualifies for work study, and also just because you qualify for work study doesn't mean you're going to get it. I would encourage anyone who qualifies for work study to accept it, that you want it, and then hightail it to your financial aid office so that you're the first one in line when they start distributing those work study positions, because it's a great opportunity to work on campus.
Monel, thanks for your question. So essentially you're asking, and I'm going to repeat your question here, if your financial situation's changed drastically since you filed 2 years ago, are there certain considerations for that with the FAFSA? Absolutely. Absolutely there are. One of the first things that I would encourage is you can appeal your aid package directly to the school. So the way the FAFSA works is you fill out the FAFSA, and then your information is sent to you and to the school, because you populate a school list within the FAFSA. And so all the schools that you listed, they get your information as well as you get it back in what's called a student aid report or a SAR report. So essentially that information is sent to them, and then they start to put together an aid package for you. And then that's presented to you later in the year when they get all that information put together. So essentially what you can do is you can immediately turn around to the school and say, hey, my situation has changed considerably. And we see this more often now that you're using information from 2 years prior. A lot can happen in 2 years. So you can put in a request to have that considered by professional review. And then the financial aid officer will look at that and make a determination on whether your situation has changed such that it would change your package. So absolutely, we tell people all the time, this is kind of a negotiation bartering process. We also see families that go back to schools with different aid packages from different schools and say, hey, if you want me to go here, I need another $10,000. And that may sound, a little intense, I guess, but it's a process that works. So appealing your aid package is definitely something you should consider.
And appealing works better at a private institution than a public institution. So keep that in mind. It depends on where you're going to school, but it never hurts to ask because where they can say no. So
absolutely. And if they do, then you know where you stand, and maybe you'll pick that other school that gave you a better aid package.
Yeah. So if you're just joining us, we're Carly and Jason from Community America Credit Union. We're college planners, and we're here talking about the FAFSA, which is the free application for federal student aid. Say hi if you've joined us, or feel free to ask questions. We will have all of this on our website afterwards, so you can go back and visit it. But everything that we suggest today, they're free resources, and so we have no sponsors or anything highlighted. We're just telling you how we do our jobs and the resources that we use.
Yeah, one of the things that we missed, I can't believe we missed it, is when did it open? So the reason why we're having this now is the FAFSA opened for this upcoming college year. October 1 is when it opens. So just a few days ago, and you can start applying now for this. Now, there are also some other resources that can help you out. Besides us, we'd love to meet with you face-to-face, and feel free to schedule a meeting with us. But the government gives you a couple resources that I think are really helpful. One is you can get a PDF version of the FAFSA. So if you're going to fill it out online, you can actually look up the PDF version and see exactly what the questions are and start preparing with that. You can also do a FAFSA worksheet, which helps you get all the documents together that you need. That's also a resource for you. And then there is a long 66-page PDF document that the federal government gives you that goes line by line that talks about specifics. So those are three resources that are freely available in addition to FAFSA that can help you fill it out. And then obviously we're here to help too.
Yeah, so Nathan, I see your question about the number of children you have and how that matters on the FAFSA. So one of the three things that the FAFSA will consider is your household information. And it definitely matters whether or not you're paying for more than one child in college. And so one of the questions is how many people are in your household. Another question is how many people are in school at that time. So the number of kids, you may think that you didn't have much luck with the FAFSA with your first kid, and then you're surprised when your second kid goes to school that it changes your EFC, which we haven't talked about EFC. So, okay. I'm going to back up for a second. So Nathan, yes, it does matter, and that is because the number that the FAFSA shoots out afterwards is called your EFC, or your expected family contribution. It is the number that the government gives a family or a student that says, we think you should be responsible for this amount. And it's what your institutions are going to use to determine how much aid to give you. So don't think that it's necessarily you have an EFC of $10,000 and you have $10,000 just sitting around doing nothing for you, and you're like, oh, I can put this towards my college. That's not really what it is, but it will. Had some technical difficulties here, threw me off for a second. But it is just a number that is assigned to a family, and so once you have that EFC, the more children you have in school at that time, it affects that EFC. And it almost, like if you have two kids in school, it could essentially cut your EFC in half. So another reason to definitely file the FAFSA, even if you file it for one kid and you don't get any free money, I'd say file it for the second one because, again, it's free and your EFC could look really different.
Yeah, and it's another good thing that you might want to make sure that the school that you really want to go to knows your specific situation in that regard. I have a personal experience with that. I'm a triplet, so I have two sisters, and I have an older brother that's 3 years older. So you probably already figured out what happened. My parents had 4 kids in college at one time, and so those type of things do happen. And it's definitely something that you want to talk to the school and know that they know that that's happening and you know that it's happening.
One thing to keep in mind with the FAFSA too is, so you don't have to keep everything straight of like, well, what one do I want and what one don't I want? The government's going to award you the best case scenario first. And so you'll get grants if you qualify for grants, then work study, then student loans, the subsidized version first, the unsubsidized version second, and then parent loans. And it goes in that order depending on whether or not you qualify and how early you file the FAFSA. So some of this stuff is a first come, first serve. So the FAFSA opened on October 1st. I'd say get in and file your FAFSA as soon as possible, certainly by any posted deadline. So whether it's an institution's deadline or your state deadline for Kansas or Missouri, because some monies will run out and you don't want to miss out on free money simply because you didn't file it in time.
Yeah, Nathan, so that's a good question. You said, how do 529 balances impact the result of the FAFSA? And they do. Now, I can tell you that the FAFSA is based on two things, income and assets, and that's for parents and the student. So depending on who that 529 is tagged to, whether it's owned by the parent or owned by the student, they will factor into your assets.
But it's always parent assets. So
Yeah.
529s, even if it's for your kid, it's always factored into the parent asset, which is a little better because parent assets are
Yeah,
Right.
so they basically have an income. The FAFSA looks at a specific percentage of your assets that can be earmarked to college, and the allowance for parents is better than students.
Yeah.
So essentially the government thinks that students should be able to contribute a larger portion. So the fact that it is a parent balance is a good thing. And I will tell you that a lot of people think, does this mean I shouldn't put into a 529? Let's go back to the fact that the free money that comes from the FAFSA is for very low income families, and rightfully so. So what that means for you is that if you have the ability to put money away in a 529 and it's included as an asset, what's the worst that's going to happen? It's probably just going to substitute a loan from the government. And that means that you're saving versus borrowing. And in my opinion, my humble opinion, I think that's way better than having to take out a loan and rack up debt. So the fact that you've put money in a 529, I'm assuming, is something that's really, really important. I think it's really commendable, something that we tell families all the time. And even if it does penalize you in a very small way on the FAFSA, it's definitely better to do it that way than to have nothing put away at all.
So we are actually down to our last 10 minutes. Time flies when you're having fun. So if you have any questions out there, make sure you get them up on the comment thread so we can get those answered in these last 10 minutes. And remember that you can always find us online at communityamerica.com, or you can come back to this video at some time and we will have our contact information as well.
And I will put in a shameless plug at this point too. So we're talking about how to get money for college, but there's not a lot of transparency when it comes to college cost. And one of the cool things that we can do is we built a tool that can compare colleges and their net prices. And it's something that can be really eye-opening for you so that you can figure out what your best value in higher ed is. And so we'd love to also, that's something we can do in a face-to-face meeting. And that's another reason why you should come and visit with us, because we'd like to help on that side too. So you get the money, but we also want to help on cost.
Yeah, it's a really powerful tool because you may have a school that's on your dream list, but you look at that price tag and you think it's out of reach for me. But until you apply to the institution, which there are generally application fees, so you would have to be able to fund the application fee and then file that free application for federal student aid, you really don't know if that school's out of reach, because what you're looking at is a sticker price versus a net price. And Jason and I can help you help look the net prices, and then certainly a total cost of attendance, which is going to also be different than just your tuition and fees.
Yeah, and we're a credit union. We love our members, but you actually don't have to be a member to meet with us. So that's something that we do like to say. We meet with members and non-members, although we definitely like to have you be a member.
We don't think you'd be disappointed.
Yeah, we definitely don't think you would. And but we can meet with you if you're a non-member as well.
It's a free service. We just want to help families navigate this sometimes convoluted process. So.
Now, we haven't got any other questions, so I want to add one more thing. I'm just looking through our notes, and we've covered about all of it. But there is one other application for aid, and it's called the CSS profile. And so if you've seen both, you might be a little confused about, well, what's one versus the other? So the free application for federal student aid is to get all the aid from the government. Now, some additional institutions, primarily private ones and a few state schools, will ask for additional information, and it's essentially an additional layer of vetting of your finances, and it's called the CSS profile. Now, whereas the FAFSA is free, the CSS profile does require a fee to fill it out, but it's essentially a way for private schools to figure out other pieces of your income. Do you have farm assets, et cetera? And it's a good way for them to get a better picture of your finances, because there are some gaps in the FAFSA and it doesn't look at everything. So that's what the CSS profile is.
And so, like you said, gaps. Your FAFSA, you may exhaust all your possibilities, take out your student loans and your parent loans, and you still have a gap, and that's because your EFC is going to stay the same for the entire year, but different schools cost a different amount. So I've worked at MCC, the community college on Missouri side. Jason's worked at Rockhurst. One's a community college, one's a private institution. So they have different costs, but the EFC would have been the same, and you may demonstrate more need at a private institution than you do a community college. So you may get to a point where you still have that gap in aid, and the FAFSA has given you everything it can. Then you're going to look at private lenders. So Community America Credit Union does not have a student loan product. There are others out there, and this is a place where if you find yourself in a position where you're looking for student loans, whether they're federal or private, please make sure you understand everything and that you've looked at all your other possibilities. Maybe you could choose a different school or a different path to get to that school so that you're not taking out loans. The loans will stay with you for the rest of your life, and even if you are in a loan forgiveness option, that still requires you to make 120 loan payments. So you're still paying on it for 10 years. And our goal is to get you to your college degree with the least amount of debt as possible. And so before you take any loans, give us a call and let us see if we can find something else for you.
Absolutely. So we do have another question from Mandy. What's the top question that you get from families? That is an excellent question. I think when it comes to the FAFSA, it's, am I going to get money? And so that's a pretty tough question. You would think it would be pretty cut and dry as whether you're going to get money or not. But sometimes, it is a pretty complex calculation that the FAFSA is doing, and you don't always know what you're going to get, which is why we want to encourage you to fill it out regardless. The second way that you can do this is there's a government-sponsored piece to the FAFSA on the same website. It's called the FAFSA Forecaster. That's FAFSA 4 caster. And you can get on there, and it will actually estimate the amount of aid you're going to get from the government before you even fill out the FAFSA. So we send that to families all the time to go in there and put in their information and figure out, okay, well, I'm maybe going to get a subsidized loan, or maybe going to get an unsubsidized, or maybe I'll get grants. And that's a good way to gauge before you go in and do the full process.
And then similarly, another question we get asked all the time is about scholarships. And so a lot of scholarships now are going to require that you follow the FAFSA, but not all. And scholarships can be available through your federal and state governments. They can be available through your institution. Then there are private scholarships. And so we have some free scholarship searches, great database tools that can filter, thousands, hundreds of thousands of scholarship dollars. And we can share those with families, because I think the biggest question just is around financing college. And so that's why we chose to talk about the FAFSA today, because everyone who's going to school is dealing with it somehow, whether they are getting a full ride and everything's getting paid for. They still need to understand what are their requirements to maintain that full ride, or if you're paying for everything yourself, you want to make sure that your money is going to where it needs to go and that you are understanding deadlines and all of that. So I would just say finances in general. We talk a lot about that.
Absolutely, and I can feel time getting away from us, Carly.
Yeah.
So any last questions that we can answer as we're still here? If not, like we said, anytime that you want to meet with us, feel free to visit the cacu.com website, and we're essentially on that personal banking tab. We're under college and career planning. and you can reach out and get an appointment with us.
All right.
It looks like we don't have any more questions,
Yeah.
so we're going to call it quits.
Okay, go file your FAFSAs. Have a great afternoon.
Absolutely. Thank you all.